Hello and welcome to the Colts Cover-2 podcast. I am Joel A. Erickson. I'm joined, as always, by Nate Atkins. It is Packers week. The Packers have their own injury issues that we'll get into here in a second. But I think we got to start out by talking about the cornerbacks. Juju Brent's injured. Nate, I hate to say this because you don't really want it to be like this, but this is something we kind of saw coming.
Yeah, it really stinks to have to be right on anything involving an injury. Juju Brent's, he worked really hard to get back this season and to make this work, and it's just been bad luck one after another. We had an ankle surgery in June. He had a nose surgery in the preseason, and here he is with an MCL or knee issue that's going to have him on injured reserve at least until December and possibly for the full season. And that's 1.5 of his first 2 years. Just a really unfortunate run for him. And I know I was just talking to him in the locker room after the game on Sunday, which is why this is so jarring to us, because he was in, granted the fact that they lost and he wasn't happy about that, was in pretty good spirits about what this year can still be for him and for the group, and how he was ready to take this challenge as the number one cornerback. He didn't want to be defined as a young player, and he thought he could make plays like that interception that was ruled not an interception barely. And then just a couple of days later finds out that a knee that he had tweaked in that game is now going to sideline him at least until December, possibly the whole season. And it is super unfortunate, but it's also kind of why we had stressed that this team needed some depth behind a player like that who has had a lot of different injuries in the past year, missed half of last year with, quad injury on top of 2 hamstring injuries and a wrist injury. And it's just been kind of every body part for him, unfortunately. And they just kind of decided to roll with him and roll with Jalen Jones on the other side. And on Sunday, those were the only 2 cornerbacks that they had dressed for the game on the outside cornerbacks. And so now they're just in a very interesting spot where they have to figure out not only, contingency plan for this week against the Green Bay Packers, but potentially for 16 more weeks. We're just at the tip of the iceberg of this season, and here they are in week 2, facing a pretty significant situation at a premium spot. Coming into this year, I ranked all the Colts players on kind of who I thought was needed to have the biggest years or the most important years for them in this most essential Colts series, and I had him number 7. That really spoke to how much promise they had in him, but also how much they were depending on him with how little else they put around him in the room. So it'll be interesting to see how they go about scrambling and putting this together now.
Yeah, the immediate answer is probably Dallas Flowers. I know he was inactive last week, but he was kind of the 4th outside corner, or the 3rd outside corner the whole training camp. The hard part is I just don't know if he's is he ready? Is he physically ready to play a starter's? I know he's got the confidence. I talked to him today. Dallas Flowers is always confident, but he didn't look like himself. He didn't look like he is fully all the way back. And Gus Bradley kind of acknowledged that at one point, to the point that I kind of wonder if we might see Sam Womack too.
Yeah, it's interesting to look through the possibilities, because I think you could go in a few different directions. None of them are, decisions you're going to feel great about. It's really a contingency type of thing right now. So Samuel Womack has played a little bit on the outside when he was in the 49ers. I don't sense it's not his best spot. He's built more to be a nickel corner. He's a special teamer in focus, but he has done it there before. It's just he feels like he can play and press, but he's not built the way that Jalen Jones and Juju Brents are. So maybe that's one option, like you said, Dallas Flowers, but they just made him a healthy scratch because I think they saw what we saw in the preseason, which is that he's not back from the Achilles tear that he just suffered last October. And kind of how could he be? His game is built on athleticism. So it's just a bit much to ask him to do it, but maybe they feel like they have to. They got a couple other guys on the practice squad. They just signed Kelvin Joseph, who's a former 2nd-round pick of the Cowboys. He's played fewer than 400 snaps in the NFL. David Long, cornerback formerly out of Michigan. I'm not sure if he has played. I'm not sure he's played very much either. Yeah, I guess a little bit in his career, but again, more of a special teams guy. And then I don't know. It's possible that they also shuffle the deck a little bit, where maybe they consider playing Kenny Moore on the outside. He plays that in base. Last year, they chose not to do that when Juju went down, but that was more of a week-to-week type of injury. Now they know he's not going to be back for a long time. Maybe they do it and roll that way. In which case, it could be Lamons or Chris Lamons or Womack at nickel. Maybe they look to move one of those two safeties to the nickel now that they have Ronnie Harrison, but also Julian Blackman is dealing with a shoulder injury today. We don't know the severity of that. So there's just so much up in the air with the secondary at the moment.
Yeah. Womack kind of was telling me today that he kind of feels like he's played a lot of outside corner in San Francisco. It's tough to know. He doesn't have that many snaps on defense total. He just doesn't really have the body type that we're used to seeing. But the idea of playing Kenny out there, Kenny obviously doesn't have the same body type either. They're kind of going unless one of those guys on the practice squad comes up, it feels like they're going to have to make some compromise somewhere in terms of being ready. I guess the one good thing for the Colts, and this might be something that is a bad thing for the Packers, is right now Packers fans are saying the same thing about their quarterback situation that we're saying about the Colts cornerback situation, which is, why didn't you go get better depth? Because their quarterback is almost. I mean, they keep leaving the door open for Jordan Love, but I think we all kind of know it's pretty much going to be Malik Willis, who they traded a 7th-round pick for at the end of camp.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned Samuel Womack. He's played some outside corner. I know he's played it, but he has 216 career snaps. That's half of what Juju Brents played last year. So that just puts into perspective kind of the spot that they're in. It's going to be a gamble no matter what they decide to do there, which is exactly a good comparison to the Packers, who just traded for Malik Willis this past offseason from the Titans. So he has not played very much. He has 67 career attempts on all but one of those.
I think he's only been in Green Bay for like 21 days or something like that.
Yeah. So it's a new playbook, playbook that was built for Jordan Love that they're going to tailor down to Malik Willis, who, the profile of Malik Willis, the way he looked when he did get 3 stars for the Titans back in 2022 is very, very raw passer. I mean, he's a runner, first and foremost right now, is just until he develops, until they can get him in a flow. And I imagine that's what they're going to try and do. He had, he had 27 carries for 123 yards a couple years ago, but he, was not able to get a passing touchdown in 3 starts. So that was kind of who he was then, coming out of Liberty and just very raw offense. So we'll see. It's possible they've been designing something interesting for him, but like you said, it's only been like 3 weeks and it's not been first team reps. So it's until now. So yeah, I would imagine a pretty basic game plan for him. I'd also imagine, based on what I just laid out, his skill set, you have Josh Jacobs in the backfield, and the Colts just gave up 213 rushing yards to the Texans. I have to think this is a heavy ground-focused game for the Packers. But at the same time, they have to, in moments, think, look out there and figure out what the Colts are trying to do at that outside corner spot and wonder if they can take advantage of that. That seems like they're going to have to if they want to win this game. Someone's going to have to make plays through the air. So that's going to kind of be what it comes down to, is can Malik Willis be more manageable than what the Colts are going to put out there at outside cornerback? I think that's going to tell us a lot.
Yeah, the Gus Bradley had this quote that I know people online didn't love about there being some uncertainty with Malik Willis. Everyone was like, well, it's just Malik Willis. You just do whatever. I think what he was really talking about, and you probably agree with me on this, is they don't know what they're going to do from a running standpoint. Because Jordan Love is not really a design quarterback run guy. He had like 250-ish rushing yards last year, but like when you watch the Packers, you don't see a whole bunch of creative zone read type stuff. You don't see a bunch of like the inverted veer we saw with the Colts last week. You're not going to see that kind of stuff. They could do all that stuff with Malik Willis, and that's after the way the Colts played against the run last week. That might be a way to kind of get around the fact that Malik Willis is a quarterback with a 48.2 career rating.
Yeah, it's interesting because, another quote I know people didn't like from Gus Bradley, but it was just part of the explanation for why they gave up all those rushing yards is that they had such a secondary coverage focus going into that game, going up against a Texans team that is going to live in 11 personnel with Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, and then C.J. Stroud's ability to go vertical. So they more or less turned Julian Blackmon into like an extra free safety. They really didn't, they lightened the box. They frankly got a little overconfident against the run. And I wouldn't say a little bit, I'd say a lot based on talking to players. So this week you'd imagine that flips. It's just, I wonder how much it really hinges to me on what happens with Julian Blackmon. He didn't practice today. He wasn't out there. Whereas like Kwity Paye didn't practice. He has a hamstring issue, but he was out there, on the side. So we have to figure out kind of what is going on there. If he's not able to go, that's where I think Ronnie Harrison is the plug and play strong safety. But then, that's where you have to feel like the Packers, even though they need to design a run first game plan, they've got to go at that somehow. They've got talented wide receivers. I don't know. If they're ready to start Malik Willis, you have to think that they believe someone in his ability to complete a pass, or else, who knows? Maybe it is the same situation as as this Colts cornerback situation, which is you just never planned on having an injury, and here you are having to scramble and figure it out.
Yeah, and maybe the Packers just decide, hey, the thing we can do? We can do what the Colts did last week. Maybe we're not efficient. Maybe we don't complete a lot. But maybe we just take some shots to these receivers we have. Because the Packers, that is one thing they have tons of. They have tons of fleet receivers. Christian Watson's great downfield. Jaden Reed can do a lot of stuff. Romeo Doubs is a good possession target. Like, maybe they just say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to try to go as just go deep, push the ball down the field, and we'll make up for some of the lack of efficiency with trying to get big plays against this Colts secondary. It's not the worst idea given where the Colts' weakness seems to be.
Especially if you have those changes, if they decide to move Kenny Moore to the outside, or if they don't have Julian Blackmon, if either one of those two players is not in the position he normally plays, the communication could go haywire here. I mean, it did the last time that was the case against the Texans late last season when the Colts gave up a 75-yard touchdown to Nico Collins on a coverage bust because those two are that essential to keeping this thing at least on schedule, at least kind of in assignment of focus. So that's something to watch for. If they do have those two guys, then that certainly is less of a risk. But I still think that you can see them going down the field. If the Colts are going to play single high, which I'm sure they're going to play, I think it's going to be a heavy cover 3 game so that they can stack the box and attack the run. But that's going to leave those sidelines open for plays where on either sideline or outside the numbers, it's Jalen Jones on one side and we're going to find out who the mystery box player is on the other side. The Packers have to feel great about those matchups, if they're able to protect, stand up in pass pro and deliver a shot. And that's where I think, you'll see – I'm sure they're going to work. Matt LaFleur is really good. He's going to work a game plan that takes the teeth out of the Colts pass rush. So you got to think, play action. You got to think heavy run, maybe max protect. They're going to do what they got to do to give this kid a chance. But this is where big pass rush game for the Colts right now is this is the kind of young quarterback they have to get in his head and knock him around and make him, be the ones that create the explosive plays on him, force turnovers, the things that are hard to do to C.J. Stroud. It's going to be easier to get that away with Malik Willis, and they have to find a way. They cannot. The season's going to be in a tough spot if they go down 0-2 because they lost to Malik Willis. So this, season feels like pretty big game.
I mean, this Packers game felt really tough with Jordan Love, but it feels like you have to win it if Malik Willis is the quarterback, or if you see Sean Clifford, who was a 51% passer in the preseason and convince the Packers they needed to trade it for him. Like, you just have to do it. I think one thing, obviously, they struggled with their run game, with the Texans run game last week. And I think this is another Packers run game that can stress the Colts the same way. Like, they do a lot of different stuff. Josh Jacobs is good, but I also like Emmanuel Wilson. The running back behind him is pretty fast. They do some stuff where they let the defensive tackles come upfield and then, attack counter-wise the way that the Texans did. Also, Packers like to use their wide receivers. They love the wide receiver reverse. Jaden Reed just scored on a 33-yard one. I looked it up. The Packers averaged about one wide receiver carry per game last year, but I know it was as many as 5 in some games. All that stuff worked for the Texans last week. You expect the Packers to take, or the Colts to take a different, defensive tack in terms of how putting guys in the box. But all we have so far is one game. And that one game is enough for me to be concerned about all the different stuff that they can do.
Yeah, I think the Packers wide receivers are going to be, that's got to be the engine they ride in this one. The same way that the having three legit threats at wide receiver for the Texans put the Colts in a bind where they felt like they were getting stretched out horizontally, that created rush lanes. And obviously it lightened the box too, stretched them vertically. And so that's where the quarterback change is different. But yeah, the Packers always scheme up kind of free touches or nifty plays for whether it's Christian Watson or Jaden Reed. And I covered Jaden at Michigan State, and he did that a lot there, where like those guys can be explosive taking some of these reverses. And so that, I'm sure, is a way that the Packers are going to use that a few times to even try and get at the Colts pass rush for attacking upfield as strong as they are. When they just kind of want to pin their ears back and go like crazy. That's like an Andy Reid staple of kind of use a defensive end's aggressiveness against him by kind of getting one of those quick reverses right in behind that rusher who's already up the field, and you kind of vacate a little bit of space in there. And that's also where, like, if they're going to if they move Kenny Moore out of the nickel, that's where Jaden Reed is the slot receiver who's he could end up having a really nice day. And also Kenny Moore is essential to this run defense getting back on track when he's in the nickel versus if he's outside. So maybe their run defense issues are enough that they don't want to mess with that. Either way, I think there's either going to be a void at the nickel or both outside corner spots that I expect the Packers to keep them in nickel with playing those three wide receivers all the time, and see if they can run and run reverses and occasionally take some shots on them too.
On the other side of the ball, the Packers defense, if you watch that, like that, I'm sure you did. Nate's like me; he watches all the football games. But the Packers defense is kind of boom or bust. Like they had 2 interceptions, they had a fumble recovery, they had a couple of sacks, like 6 tackles for loss, but they also gave up some big plays. Like their best corner, Jair Alexander, he had an interception, he broke up another pass. He also gave up a 67-yard touchdown pass to A.J. Brown. And there were, I think I counted 7 explosive plays from the Eagles against the Packers defense. Maybe, and I think you can add in, to me, I would add in an 18-yard touchdown pass. That's not 20 yards. It's not the technical definition of explosive play, but it sure looked explosive. And then there was another 16 yards. So that's 9 plays of 16 yards or more on passes and 10 yards or more on runs. And like that's significant to me. That's a significant advantage for a Colts offense that was pretty boom or bust and pretty explosive last week.
Yeah, what's really interesting about this is the Packers are going from facing the Eagles to facing, the Colts offense, which is sort of an offshoot of what the Eagles do. At least a lot of carryover there. Shane Steichen admitted that he was going to be watching that Packers-Eagles game the night that it was happening on a Friday. So certainly I think he was looking at how the Eagles, how they went about in that game, where it was kind of a slow start for Jalen Hurts, where the Packers really were trying to contain him in the pocket, make him win from the pocket, and he wasn't doing that early until they were able to get Saquon Barkley really rolling with the attention to Jalen Hurts in the run game, and then work off of that to eventually getting some explosive plays to Devonta Smith and AJ Brown out in space. And so I think that it's going to be big on the mind on Shane's mind. Is I'm guessing the Packers probably prepared defensively for these first two games very much the same, where I think they're going to do the same thing to Anthony Richardson, where they have a player in spy, try and make him win from the pocket. The hard thing for them is that what he just showed on Sunday is the ability to throw a ball 65 yards in the air and to create 3 completions of 55 plus yards. And so you see that and you want to say, we've got to back our safeties way off to, not get killed deep like that. And that's where that same risk comes in, where the Colts need this to be a Jonathan Taylor game like it was for Saquon Barkley. They're going to put all that attention to protecting the deep against the deep ball and keeping the quarterback from killing you on the ground. That attention comes off Jonathan Taylor, and that's where Colts offensive line just has to really get it going. Because watching that game back, I still feel like Taylor was pretty impressive, was pretty patient, was pretty he got what was there for him. The Colts just didn't time up their duo blocks very well. Their combo blocks, they couldn't get to the second level. Really, the interior of that line just did not really have a good day movement-wise in the run game. So that's going to have to be better. But the space is going to be there, though, if they're going to take away the deep ball. But God forbid if they don't, we're just going to see what we saw on Sunday, which is Alec Pierce, Sadie Mitchell, and maybe the return of Josh Downs just kind of fly down the field from intermediate to deep levels. And what's so exciting about this Colts offense is that if you have, if you want to, the Colts with Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson have this in their bag, and they're aggressive enough to say, if you want to take away the deep ball, we'll just throw deeper. And that's pretty hard to defend.
Yeah. Josh Downs, it's going to be interesting to see if he plays or not. He talked today. He said he was 70% last week. Definitely couldn't go. He felt like he was at 80 or 90 going into this week. But the real question for him was, if I have to cut, or if I make it, like I'm going to make an instinctive cut, the kind that I'm used to, like without thinking about it, can I do that without my ankle, making an issue? So I think it really is. Like, he's back at practice, but I do think it's a big question for him of these next couple of days of finding out, what can I do? Am I ready to go? Obviously, he'd be huge if they can get him back, right? If they can get him back and for the intermediate passing game, I think for Anthony Richardson. But yeah, it sounds like it's maybe not set in stone that he's going to play.
Yeah, he was limited today. So we'll see. Last week he did. It's out there. I wouldn't be surprised if he said he was at 70% last week, unless there's some kind of setback. I mean, that's significantly more than he was at last year when they played him on just third downs against the Patriots. And again, they had a bye week the next week, and they had no depth basically. So maybe it's a situation where they just, like, I know last week they felt comfortable with the guys behind them, and we see why with how wide open A.D. Mitchell got on plays and what Alec Pierce did. But they do need that intermediate passing threat, because Anthony Richardson finished 9 of 19, and time of possession in the second half last week was 24-6 in favor of the Texans. Like, they've got to find some ways to stay on the field a little bit more. And number one to that, to me, is getting Jonathan Taylor going and getting that run game working in a more traditional designed way. But Josh Downs is key to that too, because that's sort of like, if you do have one of these games where the run game's just not working or teams are really selling out to stop it, you can work kind of a pseudo run game. Like Jim Bob Cooter had to do that for the entirety of his time with the Lions when they didn't have a 100-yard rusher for 4 years when I was there. But they used Golden Tate out of the slot on rub routes and shallow crossers and things like that to get 4 to 5 yards a pop to work as that run game. And I think it would keep him on the field. It's also going to just create some rhythm for Anthony, where I think that over time will cut down on that variance, where we see at times he's incredibly accurate, often when he's throwing on the move or off, even kind of off his back foot, but then he'll miss a throw where he's just standing up perfect in the pocket, like that fourth down play to A.D. Mitchell. I think if he has more attempts and just sees more of those completions go through, it's just going to start to build that over time. And that's where Josh Downs is a pretty important player for them. You would like to think you don't need, to push a player like that when you're going up against Malik Willis. But again, that calculation I think is risky too when there's a situation in your own cornerback room where like the Packers may be looking at what the Colts are dealing with and be equally ready to feast on that. And yeah, you've got to find a way to win this game to not go down 0-2 with, secondary issues that are going to be there. Like the way that Anthony played on Sunday, they should have won that game. And so you want to give him that chance to win the game this time if he can play the same way.
Let's take a little bit of time here just to talk about Anthony Richardson. I know you've been working on just sort of the absurdness of the throw he made to Alec Pierce. What's kind of come out of all that work that you've done?
Really, to me, that was such a moment of like, that was Anthony's way of coming back to this league after missing 10 months and hearing with a shoulder injury and hearing all the concerns about, the criticisms of he's made of glass. Is he tough enough? Is he built for this? And he was just like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to chuck it. You're going to try and take it with a deep ball and I'm going to throw deeper. And just the way that all came together for a moment at Lucas Oil Stadium where they opened the roof for this kid to come back and throw so high you wondered if it was going to go through the roof. And like everybody in the stadium just sitting there and waiting for it to come down. It was like that throw was the return. That throw was the return to life for Anthony Richardson and the return to all the dreams they had for him when they drafted him, all the things that went on ice and pulled them into their fears last year when he went down with that injury, all the things they threw out of their playbook when they had to go play with Gardner Minshew and try to get to the playoffs and to where they're attempting a short dump off pass on 4th and 1 and that doesn't work. Like they're back in this space of where they always wanted to get to that got pulled from under them when Andrew Luck retired, surprisingly in 2019. Like they have that quarterback finally who can air it out and not just go deep, not just have an arm, but have one of the most historic arms that we frankly at this point have ever measured, at least physically. You have to say that when that completion to Alec Pierce was the longest non-Hail Mary completion in the NFL since 2016. That's just kind of crazy to think that he has that in his bag. And I thought that play kind of got the whole day going where, he comes back and completes 2 more 50-yard passes. One of those took all the velocity in the world to not be picked off by a linebacker to Ashton Doolin. And then at the end of the game, when they have a 4th and 3 and they have to score to try to keep this thing alive to get within 1 score, they just give him the ball and tell him to rumble through 3 guys into it. And it's like the shoulder concerns and the durability concerns were gone. He was back playing free and happy and joyful, which has always been the most dangerous form of Anthony Richardson. It just was like this 10-month trial to get back to that through a bunch of adversity and not playing and concerns and meetings with doctors and sad moments. It's like that was the explosion of joy they've been waiting for. And it's like Shane Steichen just dialed it up, and Anthony and Alec and everybody else just delivered a moment that they had to have to kind of create this hope and optimism again.
Yeah, I was going to say the thing that stuck out to me was the day after and really kind of like from I think normally on a Monday morning after a game, if we're not flying back, I'm usually kind of like trying to figure out, what's the rest of the perspective on the game. The only thing anybody nationally was talking about was that throw. That's it. Didn't matter that the Texans won. Didn't matter like the defensive stuff. They weren't talking about Joe Mixon. They were talking, but nationally they were talking about Anthony Richardson making that throw, and Chris Collinsworth absurdly saying that a Matthew Stafford 10-yard out was the best throw of the year already on a day when the 65-yard bomb had happened. But then on top of that, though, I also spent some time at Frank Reich's Not Today event at Topgolf, his annual Topgolf event, and that's what people were talking about there. Like, I hope it doesn't. I hope it does. Frank's not too upset with me about this, but Frank was like, we talked about a lot of stuff. We talked a little bit about, some personal stuff, and then he was like, "Hey, just one thing on the Colts game, that throw." like
Yeah.
I think that throw got. I think that's an indicator that throw got everyone's attention, literally everybody's attention, across the entire NFL. About, man, we saw what this kid might be able to do when we were scouting him in the draft, and I think the takeaway for just about everybody was, hey, so I know we don't have. We're not. No one's saying he's consistent. No one's saying like 9 of 19 is going to play the whole season. No one's saying he's going to throw 350-yard bombs. But the fact that he can do that right now gives them something to work toward that I think is different than a lot of the other young quarterbacks in the league who they're trying to get them to throw downfield at all. There were a lot of like very small yards per attempt, some like historically anemic, but very small yards per attempt games in the NFL from a lot of the young quarterbacks.
Yeah, because we're seeing, I mean, the whole league is moving to the too high shell looks to take away the deep ball. And that's why I said that was a moment of saying, take away the deep ball, we're just going to throw a deeper one. Like, unless you want to park your entire secondary in the end zone, like, you have to be prepared to cover 65 yards against us. And so good luck. And it's like, it does take a special arm right now and a special confidence in it to beat some of these too high shells. And like, Anthony finished the week as the number 2 quarterback in the NFL in QBR. And I think it's fitting that the only quarterback who was above him was Josh Allen. Like, those are the 2 strongest arms in the NFL. Those are the 2 guys physically who can beat a too high shell. So honestly, like I after the game, it was post game, we're in such a mode of like, there's so, our heads are kind of spinning, and also we're in the mode of kind of whatever story we were writing on. And I was a little bit more like hung up on the defense because that's what I'd been writing about. But like, I remember thinking that it was just kind of an odd vibe I got from the Colts defensive players, where they actually felt like embarrassed. Like, it's not that they haven't had bad games before, but they just felt like they really missed something. And at the time I thought, you lost to the Texans. They want to beat the Texans. Well, the vibe I got more is that they know they got the spectacular comeback moment from Anthony Richardson, and they didn't let him have it with a win. And he's the only quarterback who had a rating over 100 and didn't win that on Sunday. And I think if they get, let's say, one more stop on Sunday, if they cut that rushing total down to 150 instead of 215, what if Anthony Richardson at the end of that game, when he is on 4th and 3 and rumbles through 3 players, what if that doesn't pull them down by 2 points but wins the game? That would have broken the internet. Like, the whole story of the NFL would have been what Anthony Richardson did in week 1. And that's not to say it was perfect, because like you said, it was 9 of 19. He did throw a pick, but he averaged 11 yards per attempt, 16 air yards per attempt, both number 1 in the NFL. The 16 air yards per attempt is double what last year's leader for the season had. Like, explosive-wise, this was the absolute show from Anthony. And unfortunately, I think it just got overshadowed by just how much they struggled on defense. But again, still, like, as we started this podcast, it's like it is dire in the secondary, and there's a lot of reasons to be concerned. I still think overall, as a Colts fan, you have to be, on the whole, incredibly encouraged, because the number one thing for this franchise still is getting it right at quarterback and feeling like you have a chance in this AFC of monster quarterbacks, and they have one that's showing some monstrous abilities himself.
Yeah, we were talking about these yards per attempt. One of the things that, I think you might have mentioned this when we were talking about the running game, but like, teams are going to have to play a shell against the Colts now. If you see Alec Pierce get deep as quickly as he did for those 2 big bombs, the near misses with A.D. Mitchell, like, they're going to have to back their coverage off. And what does Peyton Manning always say if you ever watch the Manning cast, what does Peyton Manning say when a team's playing in a too high shell? Hand it off.
Run the ball, yep.
Yeah, hand it off. So some of the stuff with the running game is, as these teams back off, and really, I think they're going to have to play in a shell because you have both Pierce and Mitchell getting deep. I kind of asked Shane Steichen about this today. He doesn't like to talk about scheme stuff, so I didn't get a great answer. But I was basically saying, like, normally a guy has a game like Pierce, the other team goes, okay, we're going to take that away. We're going to put a safety over him. Well, A.D. Mitchell didn't have the game because the throws weren't there, but he could have. He could have had a big game like Pierce did in terms of touchdowns and deep balls. And on tape, when you're watching on tape, you don't care that Mitchell missed those passes or that Richardson missed those passes to Mitchell. As a defensive coordinator, you're going, both of those guys can beat us. The obvious thing is kind of like, you know what we should do? We're going to have to play both safeties back. And if both safeties are back, like I said, there's no higher football authority in Indianapolis than Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning would say, run the ball.
Another thing that was interesting to me was seeing that 55-yard catch from Alec Pierce was a pure jump ball situation on 3rd and long. I think they're going to do that a lot. Where if it gets
Pierce said that was he knew that call was a 3rd and long call, just to help you out a little bit. Because when I talked to him after the game, he said when they got the false start and got backed up to 3rd and 15, he was like, "Oh, we're going to run it here." Because he knew it was going to be Mitchell on one side going deep, Pierce on the other side going deep, and making a safety pick.
Yeah, it's a Jim Bob Cooter special too. He had Matthew Stafford do that all the time, and people, Matthew Stafford, he's gotten this rap for he throws too many interceptions. Some of them were that they were like basically punts, but it had the same effect. The thing is, they're going to complete them sometimes. They're going to at least have a chance because you've got Alec Pierce just showed he can do it. And that's Michael Pittman's profile that we have not seen a lot of the past few years because they don't have a quarterback who can get it down that far. But remember, with Carson Wentz, they did. And he did some of those jump ball plays. Like, I think that's where we're going to see, like, Michael Pittman's – his role is going to change. His volume is going to go down in this offense. It just has to when they run the ball more, when they've got design quarterback run, when they've got Alec Pierce and A.D. Mitchell are here and they've got a quarterback to throw to them. But I think where we're going to see a step from him is some of that jump ball, broken play stuff. And it's really exciting because they've got a quarterback who's willing to take those shots. They got 2 receivers who have a chance to go up and get them, maybe a third in A.D. Mitchell if he can get there. And then if they complete some of those and they're sort of like they get into like the high red zone or somewhere in the red zone, all of a sudden, like, they still have high, awesome run personnel on the field with Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson, where they can just hurry up and go run them too. So, like, this offense has a chance to be really electric. This is just talking to some people around the building too this week. This is as excited as anybody has been about their offense since I got here by like 25 times. And like I got here when they were running all over teams with Jonathan Taylor back in 2021. But again, it was a one-trick offense. It was handoff to the running back and have him go nuts. This offense now has all these capabilities of the deep ball, the quarterback run, the explosive running back, a whole bunch of different weapons, a solid offensive line, and a play caller that is very creative and bold in pulling those strings. So a lot has to come together, but I think potential-wise, like, I think I'm giving everyone permission to get excited about this offense. Like, I think there's a chance by the end of this year, I really think we could talk about this offense the way we talk about the Bills or the Bengals or the Ravens. Pretty much any offense, just short of the Chiefs. I think they have that kind of potential.
The quarterback run thing, they only ran 43 plays, so Anthony only had 6 carries. Those 6 carries, this is what happened on those 6 carries. 4 first downs, the touchdown, and an 8-yard gain. That's as high a success rate as you can get. So I'm interested to see if they get more plays, what that's going to mean for this offense. Yeah, just more running plays, more carries for Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, it's interesting too because, like, obviously they're trying to keep that in check because the other storyline that came out of it was Anthony did take some big shots, and they are asking the league to look at that. I asked Anthony today, and he didn't want to wade too much into that, but they want that to be officiated somewhat because players are gonna do that right now. So that's why I thought like Jonathan Taylor was going to still be the bell cow, but Anthony was still so efficient and explosive, averaging 9.3 yards a carry. And what's going to happen is kind of like any time, I don't know how teams are going to run man coverage against this team when he can do that. That is going to be a big part of the progression. Is if it may be a very quick, one read, 1 to 2 reads and then take off. And he did that and ran for a first down on Sunday. So it's going to force teams to play a lot of zone. But if you're going to play zone, that's where I think Josh Downs is the key, where he's the player. The only intermediate targets they have right now are Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs. And on Sunday, that was just one guy. And Josh Downs right out of the slot where it's like the shortest depth of target there is. And he's going to be that guy motioning to reveal to the offense pre-snap, whether it's man coverage or zone. When they see that zone look a lot, he's going to get out there and settle in the way that he showed last year. And that's where we're going to have to need to see the growth of Anthony Richardson. If he can grow and hit enough of those plays in zone, eventually teams are going to run some man on them again. And then you have an opportunity to invoke more runs that are not necessarily into the teeth of the defense. I do think one way that we're going to see that quarterback run game evolve, though, is getting Anthony to the perimeter, where it's like you are giving him hits, but he has a chance to go out of the sideline or out of bounds, or he's head up on a cornerback. I think looking back, what the Panthers should have done more with Cam Newton was run him to the perimeter against small bodies. Instead, they ran him like a battering ram up the middle against the biggest bodies, and it shortened his career down. And I think the Colts are going to recognize that, and they're going to try to use Anthony more in the perimeter than right up the middle.
Yeah. The other storyline, I think, and you've done some work on this, I think you just filed a story right before we started taping this on Wednesday afternoon. I apologize if there's any to listeners if there's any background noise. I'm dadding it up at a learn to play hockey rink right now. My son is learning to play. First time out here, so we'll see how he does. But Matt Gay had hernia surgery roughly 2 weeks ago. Shane Steichen said he's good to go. He was a full participant in practice today. You talked to him. That seems crazy to me. Is there anything, any light you can shed on the, like, is he Wolverine? Does he have Deadpool's healing factor? Like, what happened here?
So the way he's laid it out is just to take it back, he felt something in his hernia after the preseason, like a couple of days after, went in, had it checked. All of a sudden it was pretty concerning and they decided to have surgery. He tried to get ready last week, but wasn't practicing, didn't practice, didn't dress. But for kickers, it's an entirely different job. So he was getting some kicks in. They took it up to the weekend and they decided, we're just not going to have him push through this, which bought him basically 3 extra days of isolation. No movements on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and here we are on Wednesday, and he was back to full participant. So in their minds, or at least their hope, is that he's kind of over the effects of that. It is kind of crazy because it's been just a few weeks since hernia surgery. But the story I'm working on is that this is similar to how he did it last year, where last year he was dealing with a hip injury late in the year, and he missed 1 practice, but he didn't miss the games. And it became this push and pull. So check out the story to learn more on that. But it became, this balance of deciding at what threshold is he able to perform at a high level versus the alternative for them right now. It's an undrafted kicker in Spencer Schrader, who they like enough to trust as their backup. But I think it was telling that they tried to push Gay to kick last week and then didn't attempt a field goal. They're just, for them to have trust in field goals, they need Matt Gay to be out there. So yeah, it sounds like they're going to give it a go again. You just hope that he's able to, if that's the case, obviously you don't want him to get re-injured, but also while he's out there, that he can perform through whatever's going on better than what he ran into last season, which is when some of those struggles popped up. Because this team's they've got enough to worry about in the secondary, and though I think their offense is explosive, like you don't want to get in a situation where you have kicker problems this early in the season.
Yeah, I think the kicker thing played a bigger role in their decision making last week than we know. Brian Mason kind of hinted at this at the kickoff. I would assume that if they weren't sure that they wanted to give him too much on the kickoff, they probably didn't want to give him too much in terms of field goals either. I'm just guessing. That's just me guessing on that. But it'll be interesting to see Matt Gay, if he can come back. And he struggled with that hip injury last year in terms of making kicks. So it'll be interesting to see, if he comes back and kicks this week, how accurate he is. But, I mean, kudos to him for kicking through something that – I mean, you think about the kicking motion. It's all torso,
Oh, yeah.
It's your whole torso. It just seems so difficult. It just seems so difficult to have a hernia and do something like that. I think that's it for the Colts Cover-2 podcast for this week. Again, apologize for the difficulties. But yeah, so we'll be back with you from Wisconsin after the Colts play the Packers on Sunday. We'll see if the defense bounces back. We'll see how Anthony Richardson moves forward. And until then, keep your eye on IndyStar.com. We'll have plenty of stories coming.